The era of the 14 playoff will officially be over after this season, and this season had a very controversial decision on who made the playoffs, and a lot of people didn't like Florida State getting left out. I didn't really like it myself, but it's whatever. I'm not really going to sit here and complain about it, because ultimately Alabama did have a good case to be in. But next year, we can all forget about all this, because going into next year, we will be moving towards the 12-team playoff. This is really going to change the landscape of college football, and I wanted to explain how I felt about a 12-team playoff. But before I get into this video, here's a reminder to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload, because we post daily college football videos, and the month of December is going to be loaded with content. So if you like college football, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and if you don't, then that's fine. But starting next Monday, I will be predicting every bowl game, and I will have 5 separate videos on bowl season. So tune in for more videos. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into the video. Now I have to say I'm very excited for this change and move to a 12-team playoff. I think it's very long overdue and needs to happen. And if you look at every other sport in the world, almost all of them have a playoff with more than 4 teams. I mean, even high school football has a way bigger playoff than college football. Then you look at the NFL, they are now having a 14-team playoff. Now you may say that having a 14 playoff makes college football special, and I could totally see that, because having a 14 playoff makes the games matter a lot more, and it definitely makes big time regular season games matter more. But I mean, look at Alabama beating Georgia and Michigan beating Ohio State. Both of the losers of those games have ultimately been left out of the playoffs. So basically it means winning the big games matters a lot. And you could say Conference Championship Week is also part of the playoff, but as the years go on, and now with all the conference realignment and transfer portal and NIL coming along, college football has been changing a lot of things. I don't necessarily agree with all of the changes, like how much money these college players get paid, and I also don't agree with the West Coast teams having to travel across the country just to play in conference championship games, but that's beside the point. A 12-team playoff is very needed, or at least more than 4 teams, because we have so many good teams that get left out. And nowadays, New Year's 6 bowl games outside the playoffs mean nothing. Now, before, I would probably prefer an 8-team playoff, but the more I start to think about it, I think a 12-team playoff is perfect. Because you still get the obvious good teams, and undefeated teams that are very deserving like Florida State will not get left out, and teams like Ohio State, Georgia, and Oregon would all have a chance to get in the playoffs. And then you would also have 2 lost teams like Missouri and Ole Miss have a case. And I honestly like that. There's too many good teams to have only a 4-team playoff. And New Year's 6 bowl games don't mean anything, because a lot of the players opt out and don't even play in the games. But another thing a 12-team playoff brings is the underdog story. Could you imagine a team like Liberty knocking off the 5 seed and making the playoffs a lot more interesting? Like we see seasons where teams take time to find their stride in the season, and they will start off with like 1 or 2 losses, but then they go on to destroy everyone else, and they look like one of the best teams in the country, and they've shown a lot of improvement throughout the year, but ultimately they have no shot at making the playoffs. But basically what I'm saying is there's just too many scenarios where you have good teams getting left out of a 14 playoff, and it just shows that we absolutely need an expansion. And with a 12-team playoff, it will make college football have a real postseason, and also a good postseason is something we've been missing for a while. But you may ask, what about injuries? And you may think the season is way too long for college players, and isn't good for their health and body. But it would only be a few teams playing a full season, and it will ultimately be the best teams making the playoffs, and I would love to see a team with the perfect 16-0 record to end the year. But yes, we may see injuries, but the best of the best have to overcome adversity, and that's honestly just a life lesson. And if you can't handle injuries, you will not win the national championship, and you will fall short, and it really adds a lot to the table. And we could honestly push for a 10-game regular season. That could probably work out really well if it really becomes a problem. But the teams playing a couple extra games will not hurt. And what's wrong about having more college football games? College football is the best sport in the world. I mean, come on now. I'm really excited for the 12-team playoff, because ultimately, what makes college football a lot more special, at least to me, than any other sport in the world, is how much the regular season games matter, and you actually have to fight to get your way into the playoffs. 8 teams or 12 teams seem the most realistic, and I say I like 12 teams better because of the underdog story, which we haven't really gotten the chance to see in the 14 playoff era, outside of Cincinnati, who was the only Group of 5 school to make the playoffs. So it gives chance for smaller schools to prove themselves, and I really do like that. And I also like how the best teams will end up getting first round byes, because it adds more to play for. And you may say regular season games won't mean as much, and that is kind of true, but I'd rather have a better postseason than regular season. And it's not like there won't be any playoff games without playoff implications. We will definitely have games with playoff implications. Like, for example, when Oregon State played Oregon, if Oregon State would have won that game, they could have snuck their way in. Another example is conference champions getting automatic bids. So if Oklahoma State or Louisville would have upset Texas or Florida State, they could have snuck their way in. And there's so many scenarios, and saying regular season games won't mean anything is kind of true, but you also have to look at the bigger picture. This is going to change the landscape of college football, and although I think it's kind of dumb how they did the conference realignment, it will be exciting to see the big time matchups. And I guess it just means more money with the games that they will have on TV. And they will always be complaining no matter what. Like for example, SMU would have been left out for Liberty, even though SMU has looked like the better team lately. But ultimately, if you lose a couple games and don't make it, you can't really blame that on anybody but yourself. But a team like Florida State, who did everything in their power, regardless of the injury to Jordan Travis, they still happened to finish with a 13-0 record, and a lot of people may say SEC bias, and maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. I honestly don't care, but I just can't wait for a 12-team playoff because deserving teams will not get left out. And yes, there will always be complaining, but that's just part of sports. There are always going to be idiots on the internet complaining over anything. I do believe this is going to create more opportunities for recruiting within smaller schools, and if a team happens to consistently make the playoffs as a bottom seeder, they could get more recruiting to their program. This gives a chance for more teams to shine, and I like that idea. It's going to create for really good matchups, and I do like the format and times the games will be played on, because there will be 10-game stretches to rest or practice after winning, depending on what type of coach you are. For example, next year the first round will be on December 20th and 21. And then they will have a lot of time of rest until their next game, and it will give time for players to come off their injuries, as the next round of games would be on December 31st and January 1st. So that's basically 10 days, and that is a lot of time for recovery. This really just creates for an awesome postseason, and there's always more room for college football. And I believe college football is the best sport in the world, and some people may not like the idea of a 12-team playoff, but I really love the idea, and it's good for the sport, and it's good for the money too. Now how the playoffs will work is the format of the 12-team playoff will have the 5 highest ranked conference champions. So a group of 5 champions will be guaranteed to get in, because ultimately starting next year there's only going to be a Power 4, and the Big 12 and ACC title race will be interesting to see. I figure Arizona and Utah will fight for the Big 12, and maybe Clemson and Florida State for the ACC title. But for the Big 10 and SEC, it can really go down to many teams. In the Big 10, you have teams like Oregon, Washington, USC, Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Those are the teams that stand out as legit contenders. And who knows if we see another team really step up, like Wisconsin, or maybe Maryland. It's going to be interesting to see. But for the SEC, you have Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, and I guess I'll add Ole Miss as the 6th best team. But you could also say Missouri and Texas A&M. But this is just coming off the top of my head. If I missed any teams, I'm sorry. But I did mention that there will be 5 conference champions, which will then set up for the 7 at-large spots, which basically means the highest-ranked non-conference champions in the country will get in. And it will basically be mostly the Big 10 and the SEC getting most of the spots. Let me know in the comments how you guys feel about a 12-team playoff. Me personally, I can go on forever about how excited I am for the 12-team playoff. It just creates for more football and awesome stories. Like imagine games like Ohio State versus Oregon, and USC versus Michigan, or Michigan versus Oregon, or Penn State versus Washington, or in the SEC games like Texas versus Alabama happening again, or Oklahoma versus Georgia, or how about Oklahoma versus Alabama, or LSU versus Texas, or Ole Miss versus Oklahoma. There's just so many interesting matchups, and it could also set up for a rematch in the postseason, if you're good enough to make it back there. I mean, we're really seeing shades of what can come next year with the little rivalry that is going on between Alabama and Texas. And could we see a national championship rematch? That game would be crazy, and it would break the internet. And both Texas and Alabama are both in the playoffs, so we might see a national championship rematch. But anyways, that is going to do it for the video. I decided to make this video because we are basically heading into a new era of college football. So why not talk about how awesome the 12-team playoff is, even though we aren't quite there yet. And honestly, this year would have been the best time for a 12-team playoff. With how many legit teams we had this year, could you imagine Missouri versus Oregon? Or Penn State and Ohio State rematch in the playoffs? There could be some good first-round matchups. Definitely going to be a crazy 2024 season. But we are still in 2023 and have to finish this season out. And ultimately, we have some good matchups in the playoffs. So I hope y'all enjoy Alabama versus Michigan and Texas versus Washington. But if you're a Florida State fan and you think you got snubbed, I'm sorry. But move on, there's always next year. You guys are going to have a good team in the future. But you guys should also like the video and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Because we post daily college football videos, and I got a lot of videos planned for this month. So tune in every day for more videos, and I hope you guys enjoy Christmas season, and I also hope you guys enjoy all the bowl games. But that's going to do it, guys, and peace out.